Welcome to the Texas Tribune Festival yet again. My name is Robert Draper. I'm a native Texan, writer for the New York Times Magazine, and I'm delighted to be here with Congressman Steny who has, since 1981, been representing the 5th Congressional District of the great state of Maryland, who had been, and may yet be, the House Majority Leader, is still, to this day, the second-ranking Democrat in the House. Welcome, Steny.
Thank you, Robert. Good to be with you.
No, it's a pleasure. It truly is. Let me start by asking, well, I'll frame the discussion this way. We're in a red state, Texas, one of those states that has frequently been thought of by Democrats as one that will swing any day now to the Democrats. But the Democrats, truth be told, have had enough trouble holding their own states, have had enough trouble holding famously, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Ohio. They have had enough trouble in state legislatures where they have lost about 1,100 seats since Obama became president, have had trouble with the state houses, now only have 15 of 50 governorships. Something has happened to the Democratic Party, which lost the House in 2010, lost the Senate in 2014, and lost the White House in 2016. To pilfer Hillary Clinton's phrase, what happened? What happened to the party, and what needs to happen for the party to regain the favor and the trust of the American electorate?
Well, I haven't yet read Hillary's book, so I may not have the full answer to that, because I'm sure I'll get that when I do read her book. I think what happened is we have had a sense globally, not just in the United States, over the last 20 plus years, that the lives of really millions of Americans are not what they think they ought to be. Now, ironically, from a Democrat standpoint, the best economy that most Americans have experienced was under Bill Clinton in the late 90s. We balanced the budget 4 years in a row, unemployment was low, jobs were good, the economy was expanding, the stock market was at a very high point, and arguably one of the most successful economies. Notwithstanding that, when Gore ran against Bush, Gore, although he got 500,000 more votes, lost the electoral vote, as did happen in the Clinton-Trump election. And we've seen this global phenomena all over the world, where technology has displaced an awful lot of people in terms of the kind of income and the kind of future they hoped for and expected for their children has eroded. And I think in that context, they have wanted something new. In this most recent election, which I was astounded at the outcome, frankly, it was a little bit like the Brexit election in England. They reached for something that was different, that would change their lives. And we Democrats, need to make sure that we connect with the people and show them that, in fact, voting for Democrats has made their lives different. And I'm going to read a little card here in a little bit that I think factually makes that case. But we not only have to make it factually, we have to make it viscerally. We have to get to their hearts and as well as their minds, in terms of Democrats are still the party that will make my life and the life of my family better.
But so I'll ask you to get to your card in just a second, but implicit in what you're saying, Steny, is like that old movie line, what we have here is a failure to communicate. The Democrats, in other words, that there's nothing wrong with the party, their messaging is the only problem. Do you believe that's so?
I don't think that's the only problem. I think, for one thing, my own view is, it's understandable because we are the party of minorities. You look at the two conventions, they're starkly different in terms of the picture they present. You see the Democratic convention, you see almost every type of American. You look at the Republican convention, it's overwhelmingly a white convention. That ought to be a strength for us. But if the population that is not like the minorities believes that all we are concerned about are the minorities, then they're going to think we're not their party. That's not right. And what I mean by that was we have been very focused on identity politics. And that's understandable because African Americans have some unique challenges. Hispanics, Asian Americans, LGBT community. There are all sorts of communities that have particular challenges that they want looked at and they want assistance with. And we have been that party. But we have failed, I think, at the same time. Jobs do not have ethnic definitions. Everybody wants jobs. Whatever ethnic group you fall into, you want to have a job for yourself, for your families. That's the way you identify yourself. That's the way you provide your livelihood and your sense of dignity and participation in your society. And we need to, when we talk about education, talk about every child, wherever they come from, whoever they are, lift them up.
To be clear, are you saying that the focus by the Democratic Party on identity politics has cost them?
I think it has,
yeah,
to some degree. Obviously, it has solidified our position among minority groups.
Right.
When we get overwhelming support, the African American community is the base of bases of the Democratic Party. You know, overwhelming 6, 7, 8 to 1 support. But why? Not because they are a homogeneous
right.
group, because they're not. They have various views, just like every other group has. But they have a consensus on the Democratic Party is the party that cares about me, sees me, and tries to help.
Right.
But in doing so, others thought, well, that meant we weren't their party. And what we need to talk about, education is of interest to all groups. That's not a identity group issue. You talk to the Hispanic community, and sure, are they interested in immigration? Yes, they are. But they understand that education is one of their number one issues, as it is for the white community and the black community and the Asian community. So we need to be talking in terms of all the community, all Americans.
But isn't the danger that if you don't talk about identity politics, don't talk about, say, social injustices, police brutality, immigration-related issues, then crucial minority segments of the Democratic Party will say, there you go again, taking us for granted. They're, focusing on the middle class, which we, the minority community, hear as the white working class, which we hear as white people.
Robert, I don't think we can talk about the generic to the exclusion of understanding that some of our constituent groups have particular challenges
right.
that we are prepared to and do deal with. So you got to walk and chew gum. I don't want to talk generically and exclude the specific concerns that some of our constituencies have that are unique to them. We're dealing with DACA now,
right.
and we are passionately for DACA. Now, DACA does not affect most Americans. Actually, I would argue it affects all Americans.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, we're focused on that. But it should not be to the exclusion of making sure that all the families in Texas and in the states you mentioned, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Ohio, understand that we are for them as well, and in fact, have been for them over the years.
So you got statistics to buttress that contention.
You talked about at the beginning message. And we all talk about message. Trump had a message, make America great again. Roosevelt had a message, a New Deal. But then we had a fair deal. We had a new frontier under John Kennedy. And we now have a message that we call the better deal. As you know, Speaker Ryan talks about a better way. And if you read their book that they issued in 2010, it was replete with a better way. So that's not new, they're just applying it. So we now have a better deal, better jobs, better wages, better future. That's our headline. And that's as good a headline as any other fair deal, new deal. Okay, but what does that mean? And what I'm going to be arguing is that really, whatever our slogan is, you'll look at our performance and see who's given you a better deal, a better way, a fair deal, a new deal. Because it seems to me ultimately that's the test. And the analogy I make is if I'm the manager of the baseball team and somebody comes in and tells me, I've hit an average 325 over the last 5 years, and somebody else comes in to me and say, I hit 340 last year, but I hit 270 the 4 years before that. Who do you hire? You hire the guy that hit 325 for 5 as opposed to 340 for 1. And so I'm going to be arguing this. Yes, the better deal, but you don't have to just take us because we have a slogan. Take us because we have a record. Take us because we've delivered. Let me read you some statistics. It took 68 years, that is 48 to the end of the Obama term. Democrats had the presidency 32 of those years. Republicans had the presidency for 36 of those years. And as you recall, you can go through it now. We had Truman, then we had Eisenhower, then we had Kennedy Johnson, then we had Nixon, and then we had Ford, and then we had Carter. My point being, it wasn't just one string of Democrats or one string of Republicans, so you can't argue that it was, you were lucky during that period. We were interspersed. The average of the 32 years that a Democrat was president of the United States, the average GDP growth was 11.4%. Average over 32 years. Under Republicans, what did I say, 11, excuse me, yeah. I skipped a 4.1%. Yeah. A significant difference. 4.1% average GDP growth. Under Republicans, for 36 years, the average was 2.5%, a 1.6% difference. That is millions of jobs. I'm going to tell you that figure a little later. The stock market. We've seen a spike in the stock market a little bit under Donald Trump. He's taken credit for that, as every president would take credit for that. Look what I've done. I would argue it's not a long enough time for us to know. The general, over 32 years, 36 years, 68 years, average stock market per annual increase under Democratic presidents for 32 years was 11.4%. Under Republicans, 4.7%. Less than half the growth. We'll see what Trump does. But let me give you this starkest example recently that all of you would remember. Under Clinton, stock market went up 225% from his first day to his last day. Now, if you had a 401k, that means it doubled, more than doubled. Under Republicans, 4.7%. And they had 36 years. Now, that's a stark difference in the appreciation of value of the stock market for anybody who has any savings or investments in the stock market. If you took $10,000 and invested it only during the 32 years that Democrats were president, and did the same with another $10,000 under Republican presidents over 36 years. So this is not just a slice of look what happened last year. Your Republican invested $10,000 would now be worth $48,788. That's a 400% increase. You would say, oh, that's not pretty good. Under Democrats, that $10,000 over 32 years, in other words, invested only when Democrats were president, it would be worth $268,683. That's about a seven-fold difference to the good for people. Last figure I'm going to give, I got a number of other figures on here. The last figure I want to give you, again, 36 years Republicans were president, interspersed, 32 years Democrats dispersed. During the course, and I'm not one that believes that government creates jobs. What government creates is an environment in which people are prepared to take risk and create jobs. Not government that creates the jobs, but creates the environment, the sense of confidence in the economy. During the 36 years, 4 more years than Democrats had, there were 35,448,000 jobs created under Republicans. Under Democrats. And you can go to these figures. They're all, you just Google them. 62,669,000. Not quite double but about 30 million more jobs were created under Democrats. Now, what's the relevance of that? The relevance is, look, I can say I'm going to give you a better deal, or better wages, better jobs, a better future, but forget about what I say. Hire the 325 hitter for 5 years. Not the hitter who hit 325 last year, but hit 240 the 4 years before that. Democrats have done what we said we would do. Why? Because we believe investing in government. We believe investing in people's education, in infrastructure, in protection of the environment, in health care. We believe in that. We also, by the way, believe in balancing the budget. And my Republican friends would say, the hell you say? Look what you guys have done. In fact, the only time the budget was balanced 4 years in a row was under Bill Clinton in your lifetime. The only time.
But Steny, pardon me for interrupting.
Yep.
Are you of the belief then that the keys to the kingdom can be handed to the Democrats if they go to the electorate and say, we are statistically better for you than Republicans? I mean, do you think that those statistics seem unassailable? But do you think it'll be persuasive, realistically, for Democrats just to say, you need to hire us because we've always done better for you?
No, I think they need to hire us because we have a plan to make their lives better. And they need to believe in that plan. Now, Trump didn't have a plan, but Trump said we're going to make America great again. My view, sort of like the Brexit vote, the English, the Americans didn't think their life was great. There were a whole lot of us living in this country who didn't think our lives were what we wanted.
And Trump understood that, seemingly.
Yeah.
Viscerally, he seemed to get it in a way that the Democrats did not.
I think we were too mired in specific white papers.
Yeah.
Every election is an individual election. My own view, and I was very much a strong supporter of Hillary Clinton's. I went around the country and campaigned for her. I was amazed at the level of enmity that was directed towards Hillary. I think 25% of the vote that Trump got was not for Trump, but I can't vote for Hillary. I think that not, and 25% is just a guess. It may have been 30, it may have been 20%. But it was a significant portion of the electorate who I talked to who said, I just don't trust Hillary, and who thought Hillary is just more of the same. Now, frankly, more of the same, the irony for a Democrat is, we went from the deepest recession under George Bush that anybody had experienced at less than 90 years of age, because you hadn't experienced the Depression, to an economy which had low unemployment and was a growing economy. The stock market had doubled in value from George Bush, maybe almost tripled in value. And so things were going pretty well. But that was the case under Clinton, and Gore lost. And it was the case under...
And wasn't the problem also that Democrats found themselves in a position of defending against Republican attacks the Obama recovery, the economic recovery, and saying, actually, we've done all of these things, essentially citing some of the statistics you have, and thereby developing kind of a blind spot along the way for people who were feeling a great deal of economic anxiety, who were left out of the recovery.
And we said some dumb things. We said the deplorables, which was like Romney's 47%. We said we were going to put coal miners out of business. We're not going to put coal miners out of business. Natural gas and solar and water is putting coal miners out of business. So the head of the coal industry said we're not going to build any more coal plants. He's not going to build more coal plants, not because of Democrats or Republicans' policies, but because of the market. Right. Natural gas is just too big a competitor for them. But we have to get over this sense that millions of our people feel that we elites, Republican and Democrat, because the elites in the Republican Party lost too. And Hillary was part of the elites, and Hillary was part of the same old. Been there, done that. And they wanted something new. And we have got to reconnect with those folks and say, look, not only are we saying we care about you, the point of my card is, talk is cheap. Look at what we've done, and look at what we say we want to do. And I think we're going to win the 2018 election.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you about,
Yeah.
because the bad news for Democrats in 2016 is the good news for Democrats in 2018, which is Donald Trump. And there's been a lot of talk recently about Chuck and Nancy, which is a proxy for the question, should Democrats work with President Trump? There's a view that look, the electorate wants to see the Democrats are a party of governance, that they're capable of helping get the country and get, frankly, the Republicans out of this mess. There's another side that says, no, don't give President Trump any wins. Let the Republicans twist in the wind and run on that in 2018. What's your view?
I think when McConnell said, when asked, what's your objective over the next 4 years, my objective is that Obama will not have a second term. What that said to the American people is, I'm not worried about whether you have a job, whether you have education, whether we bring down unemployment, whether we defend the country. I'm really focused on whether we beat Obama. If the Democrats take the same position, fie on us. I've told people, you know, Donald Trump, President Trump says, I want a health care bill that covers everybody, is cheaper, and has higher quality. He sends that bill down, I'm voting for it. I think the American people ought to take it out on anybody who says, I won't work with Donald Trump simply because he's Donald Trump. If Donald Trump has a good idea that will help the American people and help our country, then I think Democrats ought to support it.
Does any idea like that come to mind?
Well, I mean,
that he has himself, that has come from the White House.
Well, what happened that got some of this controversy about Chuck and Nancy about was he said he'll sign the DACA bill. Right. I think that's a good idea. I'm for signing the DACA bill. I think that sending DACA kids home from the only country they really know makes no sense for them or for us. And so if he'll sign that, hooray for him.
There's the if, though. He came out of the meeting and faced the press and said, there's been no deal, leading to the question of can you trust this president, particularly when he may say what you guys want to hear, but then will attend to his base, and once he feels their wrath or their discontent, reverse himself. Can you trust him?
He has not been the paragon of consistency that you would like, that's for sure. And I don't think anybody knows, including his staff, if he says thing 1 hour that he's going to say the same thing the next hour. However, he's the President of the United States. We have to deal with him. And if we pass a bill and send it to him, we'll see. Paul Ryan says he wants to protect the DACA. If the DACA bill came to the floor, I prefer the Dream Act, which is what we talked to the president about. If the Dream Act comes to the floor, it'll pass. Lindsey Graham and Mark Rubio say it will pass the Senate, which means they think they have 12 Republicans who will vote with all the Democrats. Getting it to the floor is the issue. Paul Ryan said he wanted to have a transparent Congress that took issues one at a time, and they would not duck the tough issues. Paul Ryan ought to put the Dream Act on the floor. We'll have 194 Democrats vote for it, right. Every one of our Democrats. Yeah. And I can't believe that we won't have 30 or 40 or 50 Republicans vote for it. As a matter of fact, I've had one Republican friend of mine say that if it comes to the floor, it'll get close to 300 votes, because a lot of Republicans will vote for it. We're not doing that, unfortunately. The ACA is a perfect example of a bill. They criticized us for not having full and open discussion. We had over 200 hearings, as you know, and a lot of amendments Republicans and Democrats offered. Ultimately, the Republicans decided to all oppose it. Grassley decided not to work with Baucus into getting to a bipartisan bill. And so we passed it in a partisan fashion, and we passed it in a clumsy fashion in that we didn't go to conference and perfect it. The ACA needs to be fixed. It's not working perfectly for small business. It's not working well for people on the individual market, which is about 6% of the people. We need to fix it. We need to fix it in a bipartisan way. What we don't need to do is jettison it and knock 20+ million people off of having
Well,
insurance.
since you've brought up the ACA and also brought up a better deal, I was there in Berryville, Virginia, when a better deal was rolled out and when the pamphlets were handed out saying what this included. And among the things it included was the policy position that drug prices should be renegotiated for Medicare. Now, as you well know, ACA was passed in no small measure due to the support of pharma. How was that support of pharma secured? Through a backstage deal engineered by Harry Reid, in which it was understood that there would be no renegotiation of prices and that there would be no reimportation of drugs. The Democrats are now essentially saying that was a bad deal, and we believe we can pass a superior version of health care without pharma's help. Do you think that's possible?
I think it's possible. I don't think that's necessarily the position of the Democratic Party now. I think we do believe that negotiation of prices clearly saves them a lot of money for the Veterans Administration, is something that ought to be on the table, but because prescription drugs costs are driving costs along with diagnostic tools, and we're living longer. Those three components are probably the three major components.
But you lose pharma support when you do that.
Maybe you do and maybe you don't.
So you think that Obama and Harry Reid negotiated a bad deal with pharma?
No, I
They
didn't
could
say
have gotten
that.
a better one?
That was Billy Tozan. Apparently they thought he didn't do such a good deal because he's no longer with them.
Right.
Billy Tozan was a Republican former chairman of one of our committees that dealt with drug prices and went to pharma.
Right.
What I'm saying is that the ACA was not perfect. One of the reasons it was not perfect is because Republicans would not vote in the Senate. We didn't have 60 votes to go to conference. So it was passed through reconciliation, which is a clumsy, limited process, which the Republicans are now finding out about. It appears they're not going to be able to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which they've been promising for 7 years, which is why they're so roiled internally in their party. What I'm saying is Democrats are prepared to work with and want to work with Republicans consistent with John McCain's sort of mantra of the only way you do really good things is in a bipartisan way. That's the way tax reform was done in 1986. Last time it was done, big bill. So we need to work together because medical costs are going up too rapidly, and we've got to contain them. There are provisions in the Affordable Care Act which try to do that, but we have to some degree slowed the growth, but we haven't gotten to where we need to get. And farmers, providers, hospitals, docs, patients, advocacy groups all have to be involved in that discussion of how we do that and still provide for the a quality healthcare product to be available and accessible to our people.
Right. Now, you mentioned 2018 and how you believe actually that could be a year for the Democrats, that you guys could take back the House. And history does favor you, not only because it tends to be the case historically that in the first term of a president that in that midterm they lose a lot of seats, but also that a president who comes in with less than 50% of the popular vote is that much more susceptible to a wave election. I asked one of your star members, Sherry Bustos, if she thought there was any way the Democrats could blow this opportunity, and she said yes, if they insist on a litmus test. If they insist on a litmus test for Democratic recruits who fit their districts well. She actually mentioned Brendan Kelly of downstate Illinois, a superstar candidate in a lot of ways, but he's pro-life, he's pro-gun. There are progressive groups who say, you know, actually the problem with the Democrats is that they've tried to be too much of everything for everybody and have succeeded in being nothing at all. They've been banal, they've been vanilla. We need bold, exciting progressives who will run on a progressive agenda, and we can't once again just be the party that's only about winning. Those, in fact, are two very stark views. They are not compatible, and I'm wondering which side you're likeliest to sit on.
The former. I'm with Sherry Bustos. Nancy Pelosi is with Sherry Bustos. Steny Hoyer is with Sherry Bustos. We're a broad tent party, and we have a cement in our party. And it has always been the cement of our party, trying to make life for the greatest number of people the best it can possibly be. That's our litmus test. Not some other issues, some of which you mentioned. Abortion, Obviously, most Democrats are pro-choice. Not every Democrat's pro-life. And Nancy, I think, said it best when asked that. She said, you know, I'm from a Catholic family in Baltimore, and there are a whole lot of my family that are pro-life. I'm going to tell them they can't be Democrats? Forget it. That's not a limit. I'm the whip. We do not whip that issue. That is an issue on which each person has to decide for themselves based upon their moral compass, what they believe is the best policy. Democrats, we have a lot of conservative Democrats, not as many as we need to get back. We need to get back a lot of blue dogs.
I was going to ask you, you say you're a big tent party, but the Blue Dog Coalition has really dwindled in the last few cycles.
It's down to about 15 or 16 or 17.
It was 56 or so at one point?
It was 56 in 2008.
Yeah.
And so we need to get those back. And why are they Democrats? It'd be easier for them to get elected in those districts as Republicans. But they're not, because they don't believe the Republican Party is for the little guys that they feel strongly about. They really don't. And you look at it, issue after issue, the Republican Party essentially believes, in my view, as a principle, that people are better off if government just gets out of the way. Well, in car safety, if government had just gotten out of the way, you wouldn't have seatbelts. If you flew on airplanes, you'd still have smoke on airplanes. Healthcare is safer because of government regulations. And let me give you a stark example. Sandy, you've just had Harvey here. Sandy hit the Northeast. 55 million people were put at risk. We had a bill to give sustenance and help to the people of the Northeast, and 49 Republicans voted for it, and over 170 voted against it. Every Democrat voted for it. Why? Because we think we're in this together, and we needed to give help, and that government has a role to play. That's why the conservative Democrat from Texas, Charlie Stenholm, I don't know how many of you remember Charlie Stenholm. Charlie Stenholm is one of the best members with whom I've ever served. A man of great intellect and great patience, and he argued his position. He didn't get mad at people if they disagreed with him. He was wonderful to work with. He was savaged in the campaign. Tom DeLay et al. Savaged in the campaign, and he's no longer in the Congress. I'm very much one of those people who thinks we need to get to fiscal balance, and that will take some courageous actions on behalf of politicians. And Charlie was one of the leaders.
And one of the founders of the Blue Dogs.
And one of the founders of the Blue Dog. He was a real Democrat. Yeah. And he was a real Democrat because he had farmers, small farmers, in his district that he cared about and wanted to make sure they got a fair deal and a better deal. And we call it a better deal. And the better deal, better wages, better jobs, better future, I think is a good mantra for us. And we're going to put a lot of stuff under that: infrastructure, education, healthcare, environment, et cetera, et cetera. Job training, because we're losing jobs because of robots and other things, and we need to train those people to do different jobs so they can be employed and be able to support their families. But I think that we are a broad tent party, and litmus tests, obviously a litmus test: love your country, work hard, do the right things in Congress in terms of handling yourself in a way that brings credit to the Congress, but not necessarily voting the way I want them to vote or Nancy Pelosi. They represent their people. And I tell people when I recruit them, you represent your district. I'm the whip. I'm going to come and ask you to vote for A, B, or C, but ultimately you have to make the decision to represent your district. So I'm very strongly in the camp. We don't have a litmus test for the issues that you were talking about. People have to make their own determinations and represent their districts.
So let me ask, and I'm going to ask one more question and then throw it open to the audience for questions, but you're against a litmus test. Let me ask you if you're for a hierarchy test, because the Republicans, when they took over the House in 1994, Newt Gingrich did a lot of things people found controversial, and history will judge him maybe in a checkerboard kind of way, in a checkered way, but one thing that he's done that I've never heard anybody complain about on either side of the aisle is he abolished the seniority system for for committee chairmanships. The Democrats, however, still have that, and for that matter, they have a leadership chain that, at the top of it, is filled with, shall we say, veteran members, including yourself, Nancy Pelosi, Jim Clyburn.
Old members, he meant to say, but he was very diplomatic.
Veterans. We're genteel in Texas, but it's. Speaking of Texas, there is a congressman named Beto O'Rourke who is now running against Ted Cruz for the U.S. Senate. He had told me a couple of years ago, he said, you know, younger, restless members of Congress and the Democratic Party are wonder where's the future for us? When are we ever, even if we ever get the majority back, when are we ever going to get committee chairmanships? When are we ever going to stand any chance of being speaker or majority leader ourselves? And so I'm wondering, if you think, particularly given the Democratic Party's view of itself as the party for young Americans, that this is a healthy thing for the Democratic Party, and would you, for example, be willing to revisit the notion of a seniority system for committee chairmanships?
Well, first of all, Robert, the seniority system is not sacrosanct. You're not automatically a committee chair or a subcommittee chair because of seniority. It is a very strong, informative criteria, however, on the theory that you've got more experience and you've been there. But on a number of occasions, Richie Neal's the ranking member of the Ways and Means Committee. He's not the senior member on the committee. Elijah Cummings, not the senior member on the committee. He's the ranking member on the the Government Oversight Committee. So we've seen a number of instances where, although you were the senior member, the caucus made a judgment that you would not be the ranking member or the chairman. I think that's really what it ought to be. The seniority system is informative so that you do not have a constant churning of the committee for having political races for the chairmanship or something. The senior member, if the senior member is able, the senior member is doing his or her work, then the senior member gets sort of the benefit of the doubt. But it is not, for instance, I'd be the speaker if at the seniority system, because I'm the senior member among Democrats next to John Conyers. So I think the seniority system was jettisoned by the Republicans in one sense because they had such an overwhelming victory in 1994 when Gingrich eliminated. They didn't have a lot of senior members, and the senior members they had were usually the moderate members that were in disfavor, i.e. Bob Michel left the Congress.
Right.
Bob Michel, who I think was one of the best leaders I've seen, who was a bipartisan consensus builder and a constructive, not destructive, not negative force in the Congress of the United States.
But to Gingrich, he was viewed as being a little too comfortable being in the minority.
He wanted to be the confrontationalist. He wanted to be the disruptor, if you will. And that's fine. You need disruption. But you need at some point in time to be able to sit down and say, okay, you have this view, I have this view. If we're going to move, we need to get to our view, which requires consensus. And that was not what, that doesn't make great news. Oh, they made a deal. Isn't that right? What makes great news is when they're confronting.
Sure.
And Gingrich was a confronter and a destabilizer. The interesting thing is when Gingrich decided to be a cooperator, i.e. work on a budget with Bill Clinton.
They chewed him up.
They chewed him up.
Yeah.
They didn't like that.
Yeah.
Their party does not like compromise and constructive action. They like confrontation because their base believes if you're not confronting, you're selling out. And that's not good for our democracy.
They want fighters.
And that's why the board of directors of the greatest country on earth is not working well, i.e. the Congress of the United States.
Right. Well, but to the broader question of whether the Democratic Party is doing a good enough job of making its young stars feel like they are vital members of the institution of the party. Do you feel like they could do a better job?
I think we're doing a good job, and I think we did a better job in this last organizing session because we expanded greatly the leadership, as you know, with a lot of young, you mentioned Sherry Bustos, but there's David Cicilline, Hakeem Jeffries from New York, Tony Cardenas from California, Ben Ray Lujan, the chairman. These are all young people. So I think we have brought in a lot of young people. I'm the whip. Three of my whips are less than 3 terms,
Yeah.
and chief deputy whips. Again, Joaquin Castro from your state is a chief deputy whip. Terry Sewell from Alabama, a chief deputy whip. A number of other, Keith Ellison, a newer member, are chief deputy whips. So I think we are doing that, but there's no doubt you have these 3 70-year-olds who are at the top of the bottle and the neck of the bottle, and they're saying, you know, hey, these guys are pretty old. Not Nancy, of course, she's not pretty old, but Clyburn and I. But the fact of the matter is, and this is self-serving, I understand that, I don't think there is any consensus on, therefore, we need to replace Nancy, Steny, or Jim with A, B, or C. And the reason for that is, now I'm 78 years of age. I don't feel like I'm 78. I hope I don't act like I'm 78. I don't know what 78 means to act like. But when I was 18, I thought 78, I'd be, limping around, and if I was around.
All right.
And I think, I don't know how many of you saw Nancy Pelosi, but I don't know many 78-year-old women who wouldn't trade to be Nancy Pelosi, both in figure, but much more importantly, in energy and focus, and on top of it.
Right, but you mentioned that A, B, and you don't see any A, B, and C wanting to, replace you 3 guys.
I didn't say they didn't want to. When I said I think there's no consensus.
No
on
consensus.
A, B, and C.
In part because neither A nor B nor C wants to go up against Nancy Pelosi, who's a pretty tough politician towards people who.
She's as good as it gets.
Yeah, yeah.
And she and I have differences, as I think probably
few.
some of you are in the know.
Yeah.
We differ from time to time, but that's normal.
Sure.
But generally speaking, I think Nancy is, first of all, she's indefatigable.
Right.
Secondly, she's very effective. And so, she's been an effective leader.
She's effective, but also we saw in the special elections in 2017, John Ossoff in Georgia 6, for example, that yet again, Republicans trotted out hundreds of thousands of dollars of negative ads tying him to Nancy Pelosi, despite the fact that the two had never met each other, I believe. The Republicans still think that's a winning issue. Leaving aside what you think about Nancy Pelosi's skills, leaving aside what she should be a minority leader, do you think that unfortunately just comes with the territory of running for the House when you're a Democratic recruit, that you're going to have what some people see as the quintessence of the San Francisco limousine liberal wrapped around your neck?
I think Nancy is easy to caricature, and that's what the Republicans have done. So I think that's
caricatures work, right?
Caricatures that has worked in some instances,
Yep.
and that's why the Republicans keep using it.
Right.
But it's a caricature. It's not Nancy, I go to those districts all the time and am received well in those districts.
No, I mean, to be fair,
so
I have not
difference.
seen any ad saying that these people vote like Steny Hoyer and are going to be like Steny Hoyer. So there's a distinction. Any questions from the audience? Anybody? Yes. Sure.
So I hear a lot of talk about the better deal, but how are we communicating it? So I have kind of a 2-pronged question. How are we communicating it in terms of the average person? I mean, you rattled off a lot of statistics. That's a whole lot of policy speak. And for those of us here in the room, that's great. But the person sitting at their kitchen table trying to balance the checkbook, that's another matter. How are we communicating that in layman's terms and in ways that make sense and get them out to vote?
I think somebody mentioned to me last night the contract with America and how that really resonated with people. And I would ask each one of you, what was the contract with America? What was passed in the contract of America? And you would find very little of it. We had 6 for 06. When we took over the majority, we adopted 5 of those 6. But what we're trying to do is come up with a headline. Hakeem Jeffrey talks about a headline. And the headline is better deal, better jobs, better wages, better future. Now all that is a headline. Then you got to read the story. Okay, how do you get that? How do you do it? The first objective was to get everybody to be talking about the headline. What are Democrats talking about? We're talking about a better deal. Okay, Hoyer, you're talking about a better, what is that better deal? And then I will talk about we need to invest in education to make sure that our kids' education is as good as it can be at every level, from the beginning to graduate degree. Secondly, not only education, but better training. The types of jobs people are doing are different. I have an agenda that we started in 2010 called Make It in America. That Make It in America did not become the headline, better job, better deal, better jobs, etc. But Make It in America will be a subset for me, and that's what I will convey to people, because that's what people want to do in America. They want to make it. Not only do we want to make it in terms of manufacturing it, but we want to succeed, which is Make It in America. So we also need to invest in job training, which is what I said. We need to invest in infrastructure, in job creation, but also infrastructure which creates jobs. And in fact, we have done that. That's my card that my staff says, don't use that with people because it will just glaze over. I get that. But investing in the environment. We believe, for instance, that clean energy creates clean jobs. And we believe many of the oil companies are investing in clean energy because they see that as a transition as well. That doesn't mean we're not going to be using fossil fuel. So we have to flesh it out so that the people that you're talking about sitting around the kitchen table say, boy, if they're going to build some new roads and new bridges and a new infrastructure, new water systems, and a new grid, boy, I'm going to get that kind of a job, and that's going to be a good job for me for the next 10, 15, 25 years. They have to feel that it's going to affect them positively. And we need to make sure that as we convey this, we convey a respect for what they're going to be doing and how that's going to make America better.
Which is a kind of visceral proposition, right?
Yep.
I mean, you mentioned, a better deal and Make It in America. There have also been, you mentioned 6 for 06, but there was Reigniting the American Dream. There was Ladders of Success. There was When Women Succeed, America Succeeds. All of these were attempts, usually by Leader Pelosi, to have a Democratic headline. Why is this so important? And why are Democrats having such difficulty explaining themselves?
I don't feel that I have a tough time explaining the Democratic agenda, because I think the Democratic agenda has been so successful during the 36 years that I've been in Congress, and the Republican agenda has not. I don't think any of the Republican administrations have been nearly as successful. So I really try to get back to, forget about what I say, forget about these headlines, and you don't trust the politicians talking anyway. Look at the record. Don't have some guy come in and say, look, I can hit 340. Did you hit 340? Well, no, I haven't, but I know that I can hit 340. My Republican friends say they're going to do all this, and George Bush said tax cut of 01, 03 was going to grow the economy.
But I think wasn't the speaker talking about the statistical articulations notwithstanding, this is about connecting the voters.
Exactly, which is why I said we need to make sure, and Hillary did not connect. I really like Hillary. I think she would have been an excellent president. I campaigned very hard for her. I don't think she connected, unlike Bill Clinton, who connected. People just didn't think she got them. And I think that was a problem. But that was a personal problem. But the fact of the matter, and I don't get how Trump connected. He disconnected with me, disconnected with my daughters. My daughters were all appalled. But obviously he connected with a lot of people. Why? Because they thought what had been happening wasn't helping them. He was change, and he was going to kick all the rest of us who looked down on them in the butt. That's what I think happened. Yeah. And he also appealed, and we Democrats, in many respects, have rejected, this may be somewhat controversial, but rejected appeal to the worst instincts as opposed to appealing to the best instincts. And when you appeal to the worst instincts, that can be a very powerful appeal. And it started with, in 1972, in my opinion, the silent majority. The people who are forgotten and
Southern strategy.
They don't care with you, the Southern strategy. And very frankly, it worked. It took 30-some odd years to work, but it worked. And really, it started in 48 when Humphrey said, we're no longer going to be the segregationist party. And Strom Thurmond took a walk.
Right.
And started the Dixiecrat. And then he didn't switch parties then, but transitioned over time. He went to the other party.
Right. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, the Graham Cassidy bill.
Yes.
I think there's a general feeling in America that people who are on Medicaid got there because they're substance abusers or they didn't take care of themselves somehow. And yet, a lot of people were born disabled and they may even work, but they need attendant care and so forth. And I'm just wondering if there's ever going to be an explanation or a platform to show who's really on Medicaid so that maybe we could defeat this bill. Your opinion,
70% of
please?
people on Medicaid are because they got old.
Yeah.
Nursing homes. Nursing homes, which Medicaid was never designed to be the nursing home, but 70% of Medicaid dollars go to seniors who have become Medicaid eligible as they've spent down their savings because they're in a nursing home. Children, and yes, those with disabilities. And we are fighting very hard to protect that, and Medicare. Let me say something. This will be a little controversial. We need to get a handle on our entitlements programs, and we need to protect the vulnerable. But very frankly, if Steny Hoyer's Social Security was adversely affected, Steny Hoyer's life would not be affected. If $1,000 of the Social Security that I have went to a widow who's surviving on $18,000, it would make a big difference in her life and none in mine. We need to deal with that. We can't pretend that we can have entitlement programs that are unattended to. We need to protect the vulnerable. Now, the vulnerable, in my part, it very frankly may sound high to you. We stopped paying Social Security around $120,000. I don't think everybody making $100,000 is vulnerable. I don't mean that, but you know, if you're going to make a test, okay, at 120. But there's no reason Ross Perot needs to get Social Security or Bill Gates needs to get Social Security. And I know there are some of my liberal friends who are afraid if you in effect make some sort of means test to it, it will lose its support. I think that's a bad statement about all of us. You know, if your mom and dad is on Social Security, but you've done very well and you don't go on Social Security, you're still happy that your mom and dad have Medicare and Social Security, which keeps them out of poverty. And very frankly, at a time when you're in your 40s and you're paying for your kids' college education so they're not deeply in debt, the fact that your mom and dad have Social Security and Medicare makes you able to take care of your children rather than take care of your parents. Yeah. We need to deal with, we don't, how many people heard any presidential candidate in the last election talk about fiscal sustainability and fiscal discipline? No debate about that. Why? Because it's tough. And frankly, you've got to do it in a bipartisan way, and there's no bipartisanship right now. I've reached out to Paul Ryan to try to talk to him about working on some of these. Haven't had success yet, but I'm going to keep trying.
Yes, please, sir.
This side. Over there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't see you guys over there. Have at it.
There's been a lot of talk now in the country about putting country before party. Shouldn't there be also a time when leadership sacrifices for the party? In this case, in the House, you spoke of the bottleneck of the seniority system of the members who are sort of at a choke point and new young leadership is not rising. And it seems to me that it's soon going to be time that perhaps you and Ms. Pelosi and others have to make this sacrifice to bring new flesh and blood and life to the party. And I'm 72, so I'm right up there with you.
Well,
Whippersnapper.
understand if I leave, it's not going to be a sacrifice because I'll do a lot better economically.
Good.
So I mean, I don't think I'd be making a sacrifice. Very frankly, I think the members will make a determination. We know age. I'm 78. That's an age. I don't think most members think I've slowed down. I travel a lot. I raise a lot of money for members. I think I articulate our message reasonably well on television. My members seem to think so as well. But I've seen members who stayed too long. And I'm not going to stay too long. When my body tells me you're not on top of it, I'm leaving. And I'm not going to be probably around too much longer anyway. But my point to you is, I don't think there is a consensus. Nancy ought to go. There's 63 people who voted for
Tim Ryan.
Tim Ryan. I don't think those were 63 votes for Tim Ryan for Speaker. They were a statement. And I think when I talk to my members are pretty supportive of what I do still for them, and as the whip, as keeping our party together, as articulating our positions. And so I don't think age is the only criteria.
It's image. It's what the people see as the leadership of the party getting old and tired.
Who's the most popular politician in America right now?
You tell me.
Bernie Sanders.
I'm not sure of that. But
Oh,
go ahead.
the polls show that he's the
Polls
most.
indicate that, yeah.
The polls show that. I'm not saying he is the most. It's not my view.
Right.
What I'm saying to you is, when you asked why is he respected? He's respected because he's not with a special interest. He's independent. He says what he believes. And people believe he's for them. He understands them. He's for them. He's 75 years of age.
He's viewed as anti-establishment.
Yeah, he's anti-establishment. So it's not the age criteria. It is who he is, what he represents. That was my only point by saying that. I think I get it, and I think that it is an issue, and I think we ought to move on, and that everybody's got their own view as to who moves on when.
Let's get just a couple more questions and go ahead, sir. And then
Representative Foyer, you spoke about broad tent versus progressive ideals in terms of winning back the House in 2018,
Yeah.
but it seems we're forgetting about the gerrymandering issue. The Cook Political report has a study that says that Democrats would have to win by 6 or 7% in the popular vote to win back the House. Is that feasible in 2018?
Well, the good news is we're 6 or 7 generic points up now. We're up a little more. There is no doubt that redistricting has made the switches more difficult. Not only has redistricting made us winning a little more difficult, but also we have created so many districts in which a member has to listen to only one side of the argument. That's a problem. That's a problem because if I'm in a red district, I listen to red arguments because the blue arguments don't matter.
Right.
If I'm in a blue district, I don't have to listen to the red arguments. I mean, I can listen to them, but I don't have to respond in any way, so I have to seek consensus because I'm in a blue district. What we have done is 2 things. Number one, politically, we have, through technology, been able to predict almost with mathematical certainty the outcome of an election in a configured district, because we know who they are, and what they are, and how they vote. The second thing is we have, by choice, segregated ourselves by ideology. And we segregate ourselves by ideology of what we believe every night when we watch television. When I grew up, starting to look at television news and getting interested in I watched 3 networks: ABC, NBC, CBS. I watched Walter Cronkite, Frank Reynolds, Huntley Brinkley, you name it. They had a job that they thought was to inform the American public of what happened that day or that week or that year. And frankly, you could listen to all 3 networks and get almost exactly the same message. None of them believed their responsibility was to incite the public as opposed to informing it. Now, we segregate ourselves for an hour, half an hour. Some people, just chill out all day on MSNBC or Fox News or whatever you want, and they get their juices running. And they're incited to not like the other position, or told that the reason these facts happened was because the other side made a mistake or did bad things. That was not true in the 50s and 60s.
It's also true, though, that geographically people are moving
Yes.
to where they want to move, and
That's what I meant.
Democrats even more so, that your votes are spread much less efficiently
Coast to
than, say,
coast.
Republicans.
Yeah, and we have 2 blues and a red in the middle. That's not good for the country. Now, obviously, we're in a city that is not necessarily all red. Pretty blue city in some respects. But generally speaking, we have demographically segregated ourselves, which is what you're saying.
Right, yeah.
That's
guys,
not good.
Guys, I'm afraid we're out of time. Sorry about that, but maybe the congressman will be so good as to chat with some of you guys afterwards. But in the meantime, thank you so much, Steny
We do
Hoyer,
that
for
quick
coming
one?
up. Yeah.
Can we do it quick? I'll do it quick.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we talk a lot about the 2018, but if there's ever been a time to talk about 2020, it's probably this presidency. What should the Democratic presidential strategy be? Last election cycle we had 2 pretty strong candidates in the Democratic Party that kind of split the party, and then you had the Republicans run out 400 candidates at once. What should the strategy be going forward in 2020? Get behind one candidate or kind of follow the Republican playbook there?
Would that it was as simple as we could just say, well, we're going to pick one candidate. Who picks? The bosses, the pals, the special delegates, or the super delegates, as some people call them. Who picks? We have a primary system, and that largely determines who the nominee is going to be. And notwithstanding Bernie's concern about the super delegates, it was the publicly elected delegates that determined that Hillary Clinton was going to be the nominee. And frankly, that's been the case in every one of the elections since the delegates. I personally am a proponent of making sure that the people who are in elected office, your governors, your mayors, your members of Congress, who frankly, as soon as the convention's over, all the candidates are going to come to them and say, hey, can you help me organize your district or your congressional or your state? I think that's a good thing. But it's somewhat of an organic operation. Nobody would have thought Bill Clinton was going to be, that I have trouble getting to Trump, that Donald Trump would be president of the United States a year before the election. Nobody, maybe Donald Trump.
No.
Nobody else thought that Donald Trump was going to be president.
No.
A year or a year and a half before the election, nobody thought that Bernie Sanders was going to be a major candidate for president and raise an extraordinary amount of money and come very close to beating Hillary Clinton. So that it's organic. I don't think we know. The first candidate in is John Delaney from Maryland. He's a wonderful guy, a thoughtful guy. I think he will bring a very thoughtful tenor to the debate. I don't know that he has a chance in the world, but I didn't think Trump had a chance in the world, so who knows what's happening. Now, I will give you some insight into my view. I think there is merit in not having one of the elected politicians be our candidate. I don't have a person in mind, but I think that clearly people are frustrated. Their board of directors does not work. If I was an average citizen watching the Congress of the United States at work or not at work, I would be disgusted. There are about 8 or 9, 10% of the American public have any respect for the Congress of the United States. I want to find those people. They ought to have none. I tell you, I am frustrated as a practitioner, as somebody who was president of the Maryland Senate for 12 years, now 36 years in the Congress. It's not working the way the public deserves and our country deserves to have it run. We ought to be cooperating with one another and trying to make agreements, not try to simply undermine one another at every turn. That's not good for our country. It's not good for my 3 daughters, my 3 grandchildren, or my 4 great-grandchildren. I'm disgusted with it. Americans ought to be disgusted with it. And Americans can make it, can change it. by electing people to the Congress of the United States who are and are perceived as acting constructively to reach consensus and agreement in a democracy.
They get their shot next year. We'll see. Thanks, guys.